So I was supposed to read about 5 or 6 books in February, and I managed to read 3. That is it. So stay tuned and I will tell you what I read and what I thought of those books, and I will also have some recommendations for you. Hi everyone, welcome back to ONYX Pages. It is nice to see you here. I'm Jerry. I'd like to thank you if you are watching a video as a first-time subscriber. I really appreciate that you joined this community, and for those of you who have been here for the long run, it is always nice to have you back. Let's chat in the comments. So this February I read 3 books. I tried to reach 4. I was unable to do so. I will tell you about that in a second, but let me just tell you the 3 books that I read. The 3 books were Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi. Maybe I should do this. Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi. And then Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayden. And My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich by E.B. Zaboy. And because we're planning this year, so I took notes in my planner and used washi tape to identify what I was going to read. So I'm going to tell you about what I thought. So I'm going to talk to you about these books in a chronological order. I participated in the Blackathon, and I chose the science fiction and fantasy track, which was called Team Science Fiction and Fantasy. So I actually read these books to fulfill the prompts for this team. So the first one was Janelle Monáe, who I should just do a separate video about because I love her. Janelle Monáe was an LGBTQIA and SFF book with Black protagonist. So for that prompt, I read Escaping Exodus. That was the 3rd book that I read in February. And this book is so interesting. So in this world, so Nikki Drayden has created a world where humans have made planet Earth inhospitable, but they don't know what other hospitable planets there might be in the galaxy. And so as a result, this community has to live inside these large space beasts. So they actually live inside their bodies, and they use their bodies as their home. So every so often there's an exodus, and the community goes and lives inside this beast, and they've got bone workers and heart workers, and they use the bone to create the infrastructure of the tunnels inside for this community, and they live and use the life energy and the liquids and the internal organs of the beast, these large beasts that can big enough to have cities inside of them, until the beast eventually dies, and then they move from that beast to another beast. And this community is set up in a very strictly defined caste system. So the people, they've got like workers that work the beast workers, and then they've got waifs that are basically used to assist, can't say more, to assist in that process. And then they've got the upper classes. It is a matriarchal society, so men are not as powerful as women, and are looked down upon and treated like women are treated in our life. And it follows these 2 characters, these friends that grew up. They're from different castes in this community. They have a strong affection for each other, and we follow them as they start to realize that this setup that they're living in, the class differences as well as the use of this animal and what it means to live inside this animal, they start to learn that it might not be all that it seems, right? And that it might not actually be right. and it might not be the right future for them. And so from their different perspectives and their different lives, these two girls try to figure out what to do and what alternatives there might be to the way that their community has lived for generations upon generations. So Escaping Exodus, it was weird, it was wet, it was wonderful. I rated this I'm using stars until I actually do my 7 calorie shell review. But I actually rated this book 5 stars, and my notes were that it was fascinating, weird, and thought-provoking. And I took some other notes that I'll share with you. So I found the reading really fascinating. The different characters that we had to contend with. So definitely we had like these humanoids, right? The main characters were all humanoids, and they had this interesting spirituality, a practice of ancestor reverence. They've got a really sophisticated way of working and living with these beasts. Inside these beasts, they're spacefaring, so they're very comfortable being in space, and they're quite technologically advanced as a society. So I found that interesting. Also, Nikki Drayden takes us and gets us to understand these beasts, what their nature is, what they want, how they communicate, what their history has been. So that was really interesting. And then toward the end of the book, we start to see how this community, this society that we've come to know, is actually one of several other societies, and we see how those societies interact with each other. And so that world building, including the sexual orientations, the gender identities, like there's a lot of queer content, there's a lot of interesting meditations on what sex and gender are, how they relate to each other, and also the fact that they're a matriarchal society pose some really interesting questions as well. Race does come in and shade comes in. There's just a lot of different, this was really good science fiction, really good science fiction for all of those important social justice issues. So it was a satisfying read. It was an interesting read. I read the physical book, but I also did a hybrid where I listened to the audio while following along on the page, and I really get a lot of pleasure out of doing that. So that was a wonderful read, and I would definitely recommend Escaping Exodus to you. Because I have the Booktube SFF awards on the brain, I don't really, I'm going to try and do my reviews a lot quicker so that books can be nominated. Unfortunately, this one was published in 2019, so it would have been put forward for last year's, and it wasn't, but it definitely was a good read. Nikki Drayden has also written The Prey of Gods and Temper, which are behind me, and I'm not going to get up because I've got a whole apparatus here, but I've read The Prey of Gods, and I would recommend it. It was also quite interesting. It was a whirlwind of a ride. That was her debut novel. This is her third novel. I haven't read Temper yet, but I've read Escaping Exodus, and I enjoyed both Escaping Exodus and Prey of the Gods. I buddy read Prey of the Gods with the lovely Maya from Maya Reads, so you can check out our discussion, which is one of my earlier videos, if you want to find out about Prey of the Gods. Nikki Drayden is definitely one to watch. She, I believe, is a techie person. I think she's a coder or something like that. She does techie things. So anyway, definitely one to read and one to follow. All right, so the second prompt in the science fiction and fantasy was Nediocoraphor, which is a work of Afrofuturism centering a complex and advanced society. So for that prompt, I read Riot Baby by Toshi Onyebuchi. So this is the set. Okay, so first can we just, so cover, obviously quite gorgeous. I'll let that hopefully focus. Really nice. So this is Riot Baby. In Riot Baby, this is a work of speculative fiction or science fiction. And here we follow a brother and sister duo, Ella and Kev. And Ella has the ability to, she's very, very powerful. She has a lot of magical abilities. They're both black. And they were both born during, I believe, a riot, or at least Kev was born during a riot. They live in an inner city American inner city environment. And Ella has the ability to like impact the earth with her mind, and she has a number of different abilities that develop over the course of the plot. But we enter the story meeting her and learning about her and her relationship with her mom. She lives with her mom in a low-income neighborhood and her brother. She also has the ability to see the future, to see what will happen to people in her city. And she notices right off the bat, as she's a young girl, she looks at the different young black men in her neighborhood, and she can see their future, and she sees that they won't live very long, that they will die by violent means. And she becomes enraged by this. And the whole one part of the story is really just watching Ella's rage manifest through her magical capabilities. And I feel that this story, at least for me, helped me really appreciate how deep and powerful and justified the rage of young black folks, how justified that is and that ought to be. So in some ways this story is a meditation on rage and the creative and destructive uses of anger. Because sometimes Ella, she just wants to burn shit down. She's done. She's exhausted. She's tired of the racism. She's tired of the violence. She's tired of the poverty. She's tired of it, and she just wants to burn it down. And then there's her brother Kev. And Kev gets into some trouble and he ends up in jail. And because Ella has these abilities, and Kev has abilities as well, but she's able to transport herself to where Kev is and to engage with him and to try and enlist him in this problem, this solution that she's got. And so we follow Kev as well through his incarceration. We follow him through his release into a very interesting post-incarceration program. I don't know what those are called. But we see a future that's gritty, that's violent, that is very Big Brother, that's very white supremacist. And we see the two of them as a brother and sister pair from these different perspectives try to contend with the state of the American society for black people. This was a short story, but it was so much. It was a powerfully told, difficult story. It took me places. It gave me a lot of feels as I read it. I loved watching Ella develop her skills. I loved watching Kev develop his own magic. And I really enjoyed just the resilience that was demonstrated through both of these characters. And I don't think that the quasi-apocalyptic, the political apocalypse that Tochi Onyebuchi introduces us to, I don't think that it's very far-fetched at all. And in fact, I don't even know that this would be speculative fiction for some people. I think that this life is already lived by many. the weakness that I would say that this novella suffered from was, I think, a function of what Tochi Onyebuchi was trying to do, which was to expose us not only through his words, but to expose us through how he writes, to the chaos inside the mind and heart of Ella and of Kev. So sometimes during the course of the plot, we're taken from inside of a jail cell to a desert, and it's like, how did that happen? What time are we? What place are we in? And it was hard sometimes to move as quickly as the plot did. And I do think that we got far more. We got more of an establishing story for Ella, and not as much of an establishing story for Kev. So it felt like Ella's story was top heavy, and Kev's story was bottom heavy, and it wasn't a sort of cohesive story throughout. So I felt that I wanted to learn more about Ella's development when I was reading about Kev's, and I wanted to hear more about Kev's development while I was reading about Ella's, and it didn't give me all that I needed in that way. But this book was amazing. I've read now 2 Tochi Onyebuchi titles. The first was War Girls, which I buddy read with Brittany from Melon and Eclectic, and you can watch our discussion because it's up on one of our channels. I am going to continue reading Tochi Onyebuchi's work. I have not read Beasts Made of Night, or the second book in that. I think it's a trilogy or series, but I hope to be able to return to it, although I know that Onyebuchi is a prolific writer and there'll be other new releases. But Riot Baby was absolutely worth my time, and I would absolutely recommend it. This was published in 2019, so it's too late for the Booktube SFF Awards, but it would have been a book that in fact, I might have even nominated it, I'm not sure. Okay, so the third prompt was David F. Walker. Oh, I'll do the fourth prompt. The fourth prompt was Danielle Clayton, an SFF book with a cunning and ambitious Black protagonist. And for this, I chose a middle grade title, which is My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich by E.B. Zaboy. And here we follow Ebony Grace Norfleet, who travels from Alabama to New York because she can't live with her mother and her granddad, who live in Alabama, because her granddad has gotten into some kind of trouble with the law that her mother has to deal with. And so while their family is dealing with that, it was thought that the best thing for Ebony would be for her to live with her father in New York. Ebony's life in Alabama is very different from her life in New York. Her grandfather is wealthy. He works for NASA as one of the first Black engineers. And so he had a lot of money, and they have a beautiful house, and she had great education, and he drives a big car. I think it was a Cadillac. And so she got everything that she wanted. And her grandfather had this beautiful relationship that was full of imagination. They would pretend to be in another world as astronauts and so on. And they built this whole imaginary world. And her life in New York is very different. Her dad is not wealthy. He operates like a garage. I guess he's a mechanic, and he seems to employ some of the underhoused poor men in their neighborhood, maybe individuals with mental illness, and some who might be struggling with addictions. And so Ebony spends the summer there, and she had spent summers there in the past, so she had a few friends. But Ebony is so sweet. She is odd. She is weird in a lot of ways to the other kids, right? She has a very vibrant imagination. She does not see the world the way the other kids see the world. She's not cool. She says odd things. She's super smart. She doesn't dance like them. She doesn't talk like them. She doesn't like to do the same things as them. and she has a really hard time fitting in. I did wonder while reading her character if she was neurodiverse in any way, if that was trying to be telegraphed. I'm not sure, but even if she wasn't a neurodiverse character, there definitely was this sense that she was different from the others. And so Ebony is really struggling because she loves her granddad and she wants to go home, and she was told that she was going to be at her dad's home for a little while, and then it turns out that she was there for a longer while. So we spend a lot of time seeing the world from Ebony's perspective, and I think that's where the sort of magical realist piece comes from. On one hand, this could be just considered a very mundane novella because the things that she imagines aren't really happening. But on the other hand, I think if you suspend disbelief enough, there are moments where it is actually possible that Ebony is actually living in this fantastical world that her and her granddad had built. The writing was very sweet. I thought the character development where Ebony is concerned was really wonderful, but I feel like the secondary characters, especially the young people that she spent time with in New York, that they were a bit thin in terms of the development. We don't get a lot of their stories, and I think that it would have been beneficial to get more out of those relationships. But needless to say, the kids were kids. They were cliquey and mean and really kind of temperamental in the way that I remember kids from my childhood to be. So yeah, I did enjoy this, but there were some of the weaknesses that I explained to you. One of the things that I really appreciated about this story was about the book was that every so often there would be cool illustrations, and the illustrations depicted this world that Ella and her grandfather built together. And so there were nice, just little gems that I would see chapter to chapter, and I really appreciated that. In terms of my rating of this book, I rated it 3.5 stars. And my note here that I wrote was, the very thing that the city kids can't stand about Ebony makes her invaluable to them in the end. And that was one of the overriding themes, right? That the very thing that makes you different and makes you odd can also make you so important. So those were the 3 books that I read for the prompts. I did squeeze in X Factor, which is a Green Lantern comic written by N.K. Jemisin, but I read it on the 1st of March, so I'll talk about it in my March wrap-up. So those are the 3 books that I read in February, and I will consider that I did succeed at Blackathon. And I want to thank Jessie for these wonderful prompts because they definitely did contribute to a wonderful reading experience. I want to know if you've read these books and what you thought. My time is running out, so I'm going to thank you very much. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. If you have come this far, please leave me a leaf in the comments. If you don't know what to say, just leave me a leaf. And if you've read any of these books, please let me know what you thought. I will see you in the next video, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye.